Dr. Joe Dispenza's Becoming Supernatural, I think it might be. And he talks about how like 85% of the thoughts we have today were repeat thoughts from yesterday and the day before and the day before and the day before. And we don't notice that? Well, what if we start observing our thoughts just like we observe our emotions? We start recognizing a pattern of like, oh my gosh, I've been having these thoughts for decades. They've just become so ingrained that I'm almost conditioned. I am conditioned to have these thoughts. I'm just conditioned to constantly have them. So if I'm just constantly having these thoughts, what behaviors and emotions am I experiencing because of this? Probably ones that have made me then identify myself as a certain person or thing that is now on that self map. So now when that self map is being attached by all the because of all the attacked because of all these repeating thoughts I've been having and not choosing to have them, just allowing them to be, I start protecting them. Then I have to observe the emotions and then there's another pattern. Like that is so much happening, and it's like our mind is on autopilot for the whole thing. That's so nuts. So how can we do that? How can we do that? Like what do I do? I take the moment to recognize that I'm caught in a freaking loop. I'm caught in a vortex of just thoughts. When I'm out of quote, we'll call it, I don't want to call it control. When I'm not in the driver's seat of my mind and I'm getting caught up in the Broadway show of it, just observing that. Observing that I feel these emotions rising up in my stomach, to my chest, to my throat, to my mouth. I feel it in my arms. I start getting tense. Just observing that and be like, something's happening here. You know? When we can do that, that's the first step. I would even argue the first step is just observing that we have these things, that we can do this. Once you become aware of it, you look for it. So that's the first step I think I did, was just observing that I can observe. you know? It's nuts. And then from there, like making practical steps of observations. Like, okay, I'm recognizing now, where do I want this to go? When I recognize what it's attacking on my self map, well, I can, this self map gets rearranged all of the time. Why don't I start funneling? Why don't I start creating what's on this self map? Then I think to myself, what do I want on this self map? A big one for me is providing value to people, helping people. So when I feel like I'm in service of that, I can notice my emotion be connected to it. When I feel like I'm not in service of it, I feel the dissonance. Still my family, still all the things like I want to stay on there. So it's like once you observe that you can do this and you can observe your stuff, your emotions, your thoughts, then start taking some quiet time with yourself. Work with a coach, work with somebody, work with me. I'll help you. Like start creating that blueprint for yourself of what am I in service of? What is this map going to look like now? Opposed to what have these 85% repeated thoughts for the past 20, 30 years doing? Like instead of just having them run it. Like I don't that has to be forefront of the operation here. Let's stop those repeat thoughts from being our self-identifying map. That I guess sense of self. And once you do that, what do you do next? You start acting in service of that self map. You stay in observation of it. You continue to move through it. And you observe the progress and the process as you go through. You're going to take notice what the things you do if they feel good, why they feel uncomfortable. Is it uncomfortable because it's change and growth, or is it uncomfortable because it's not in service of me? You're going to start getting really in touch with yourself. That's what happened with me. Is once I sat in this meta awareness of it all, I became just viciously, violently aware of myself and my thoughts. And that became so overwhelming. But what it did was just made me aware of it. So then I was like, well, I need to calm this chaos. And it took time. It took time. But it was just small steps. I just know all you do is just keep moving, keep observing, keep correcting, and there's not a finish line to this. Like I'm still doing it. I'm still always going to be doing it. I think that because something that pops up, like, how do you do this without judgment of yourself or your emotions? Well, I think it's really hard to remove judgment at first because you're judging the judgment, right? It's a whole mind. It's a whole mind thing, right? It's a mind trip. So recognizing that those feelings of judgment of yourself and these thoughts and these behaviors and this mind and self map are going to pop up. Just listening to it. If you listen to the judgment and I'm going to keep using the word observe. If you observe that judgment, you're not letting it have that connection to the emotional response it's desperately wanting. Judgments are going to happen. Judgments are going to happen. But when we connect our emotions to it, when we connect our sense of well-being and our sense of self to the judgments, and we have to defend a certain side of something, like we have to defend our correctness, our rightness, our beliefs, that's where judgment starts to become a little bit of the enemy, right? Judgment in this case prevents us from moving forward. It keeps us still because the only reason judgment is popping up is because it's the limbic system is detecting a threat to the sense of self. Recognizing that, be like, in that same book, he has a really good. Sean Webb has a really good thing. He says, when you're going to say the word I or me, put the word the in front of it. So the I, the me. So it's be like, wow, this person's really affecting the me today. Separate yourself from the identifying as what it is affecting, right? You're able to observe that. And you're like, the me is upset. The I is feeling angry at this. You know, it sounds funny. It sounds silly. I know. It's crazy. But it helps you disassociate from those emotions getting attached to it. And I think that's super cool. I think that has been something I have been utilizing for a lot longer. Just when I heard him say it in that wording, I was like, that's what I'm doing. I was like, it's like having an imaginary friend, except it's your highest self looking down on the current reality version of you, or what is reality, right? I think so. Recognizing that judgment is going to be just huge. And not identifying as the judgment, oh. When you don't recognize or identify as the judgment, it changes your life, right? So many of us jump on social media and constantly, even if someone's not attacking us, maybe they're posting pictures and making us feel insecure about what we have, what we wear, what we play, whether it be music or whatever. Am I making good enough content? Is my podcast good enough? Are these videos good enough? You just get, your sense of self starts getting attacked. So when you realize that it's not attacking me, it's attacking the me, I have a lot more compassion for the me. The me's trying his best. He's just tripping up on some things. And when I understand, see the myself tripping up on himself, I'm so much kinder to him. I'm like, yeah, of course. I was like, no worries, we're good. Keep it moving, baby. That's been that's an impact in my life. Because it goes back to the sense of worth, right? Letting people down. When you realize that the me is feeling like they're letting people down, it's not me. It's a version of me that was probably conditioned through a whole bunch of actions, reactions, society at a certain time. And of course he feels that way. It's okay to feel that way. Just have compassion for him, empathy for him, and realize that that's not the full story. It's just the only story he's seen. And when you look at that and you're saying, like, what's the only story I've seen so far? Of course I think this way and feel this way and see this way. Like, of course, it has to be that way. But when you remove yourself and get into that meta awareness and you're able to just observe and you go, oh, there's a lot around here. There's a lot I don't know. There's a lot that can influence me in ways that are in service of that better version of me. I think that's life changing. Because if you can stay present in that moment, right? Even just walking and being aware you're walking. Like, what am I thinking about? These trees are blowing. Like, when you are sitting, standing, walking, wherever you are in that present moment, you're in that meta awareness and recognizing that you're feeling and experiencing emotions, but you are not those feelings or those emotions. You're just the version of you expressing and feeling them. I know this sounds wild. It sounds like a trip. But that's the cool part, right? That's what excites me about even talking about it. This is what goes on in my mind on a daily basis. And then you try to take these videos and you break them down to like, here's 5 reasons why you feel anxious. Like, of course I feel anxious. I've been researching 5 things that make you feel anxious for 3 days now. I'm anxious about feeling anxious about the 5 things that make you feel anxious. Being aware of that. It's like, what, like, there's, like I said, it's so trippy to think about the layers into this. Like I said, it gets overwhelming, but I think it gets overwhelming because we're so scared of our mind, our thoughts. For so many of us, and it was for me included, the mind is one of the scariest places to be. It was petrifying to be in there. And now through all of this stuff and the exploration of my mind, myself, my reality itself, quantum mechanics, philosophy, stoicism, I'm just naming a whole bunch of things that I just been vibing with. I became much more safe on my self map because I finally feel like I've had a word with it. I was able to like, hey, I actually kind of want to be deliberate with creating this. I want to be intentional with what we create here. Because so many times we don't even know what we want to be. We just see what other people have and we go, I want that. And then life gives us all the opportunities to get it, but we don't want to do the things to get it. We just want the thing. So when we recognize what our self map looks like and all of this stuff of observation, like, we're just so much more in tune with us. What makes us tick? What makes us operate? What we want? What has made us us? And that just comes from that present moment, right? That just comes from the moment of, I am nowhere else but here experiencing these things right now. That fear of the future and is the anxiety. What's going to happen, what might happen, what has happened before that probably might happen again. It comes back to that limbic system. It's being triggered to expect something to attack it in the future. So it's like, we're going to protect it at all costs. It's just by not being present, not knowing what's on our mind map, our self map, whatever we want to call it. Whatever Sean calls it. I'm not taking credit for it. It's just, he words it much better than I do. Sean Webb. Even thinking about how compassionate you have to be with yourself through this process, because it doesn't happen overnight. So many times we want to go from like feeling like a chaotic 10 down to a calm, cool 3, 2, or a 1. And recognizing that if we're not feeling that 3, 2, or a 1, that we're just a 10, but recognizing there's 7 layers in between there. And going from a 10 to a 9 to an 8.5 to a 7.6, like, that's the path. It's recognizing those things. And the only way to do that is be like compassionate and kind to yourself. Because when we're so amped up and juiced up on the hating ourselves, we're staying in that emotion, experiencing that emotion of fear, of anger, resentment, unworthiness kind of thing. It's nuts. It's nuts how hard we are on ourselves, and it just keeps us in that loop. It's almost like we feel like we're programmed to do that. We have so many of these things, AI, social media, news stations, political campaigns, all telling us what we need to we have to choose. It's either radically one way or radical the other way, and realize like, what am I even identifying with? Like, I've been told that I have to identify as these things, and I don't really know if I like it. Take those moments, be compassionate, kind to yourself, and be like, I have some things to figure out, kid. Like, I need to do this for me, where I want to go. Because if this is, unless you're cool with feeling this way for the rest of your life, that's, I mean, that's another aspect to this thing too. If this ain't your jam, do your thing. Do you, boo? But this is like, if you're looking to get to a next level in your life or in your growth, your evolution, whatever it may be, whatever words you want to call it, recognize these lessons and opportunities and what brought you here. Like, you don't just show up this far into a video talking about these things if you're not on a path to think about doing these things, right? You're interested, you're intrigued. Somewhere on your self map is lighting up, being like, why am I lighting up right now? What is drawing me to this? Is this my higher version of me being like, hey, pay attention? You know? We've been waiting for you to see this video for a long time. The dude in the Phillies hat finally made it. Because you'll start noticing patterns of like, I'm just regurgitating other people's words. I'm just talking about what other people have talked about to make further talking points in a conversation. And you realize, like, what substance or half of my any of my conversations do they hold? Like, you're stepping back and you're observing all of these things. Like, you're reevaluating a lot. You're noticing the patterns of like, I don't know if these have been my thoughts for 30 years. Was I just taught that when I was a kid? Or not even taught it. Did I just observe it and then identify as it? Because I only knew certain people in my life and that's just the normal. And now I am at my age 36, just desperately defending it and not even knowing why. Thinking about these things, noticing these patterns of radicalness. Like, if something spikes us so hard in our emotions, like asking why. I think that's the big one. If somebody disagrees with you and you get like, your interest, we'll call it, your interest gets piqued. Like, why? And if you can't give a rational and calm answer to the question, why does this, we'll say, trigger you? That's recognizing, oh, I need a little bit of time with me. We need a little bit of me time today. Oh, I think that's really important. Um, I think observing our emotions, if we can learn how to observe our emotions, our mental health is going to just skyrocket for the better. You're going to be aware of what we need to work on. Half the thing with mental health is being told by somebody else what we need to work on, but we don't take the time for ourselves. Because when we don't have somebody to work through that with, those things we need to work through, whether it be anxiety, whether it be grief, whether it be depression, whatever it might be, right? If we're just told that we're broken, of course our self map is going to start getting incredibly defensive. And then it's going to be bogged down with fear of like, I am broken. I can't fix me. I need something else. Like, no, let's just take some time, observe what it is that these voices or these thoughts are saying to us, and change the narrative. Observe it. I know it sounds so simple, right? Yeah, it's always simple after you had to do it for 15 years and you finally are comfortable enough to talk about it in a casual manner, right? That's the move. Like, it's understanding, like we talked about earlier. It's one of those, everybody wants the things, but they're not willing to do the things to get the things. Like, I think about myself talking about these things. Like, I observe that. I look back and be like, who are you to talk about? You're somebody with a resume of things that have gone through your emotional, mental turmoil And now you're turning around to talk about it. And your imposter syndrome that you've been taught you're not good enough, you're not worthy of being good enough. You've been taught in school that you're not getting good enough grades because you'd think differently than others. You're not good enough. And then all of a sudden, a place like YouTube or social media comes out, and you can say and talk about your story all the time. You can go off and get certified to become an integrative mental health coach. I did. Certified, baby. I help people for a living because I thought different. And observing that the whole time I was good enough, we were just different. All of those things we go through, all the things we went through or are currently going through are helping us. I don't get here without those things. You don't get here without those things. Isn't that crazy? Like, stepping back and looking at that, that's nuts. You'll hear me say, like, oh, we'll thank it someday. I used to think that was such a load of crap. And I do. I actually am incredibly grateful. And I thank the things I've gone through, the people that have hurt me, the people I've probably hurt through my actions and stuff. I'm grateful for them. I'm grateful for the things that have happened. Because I look back and I observe it was all challenging my self map. And I was just acting out of survival, fear, and lack. And now, since I've had a word with the creator of my self map, I'm much more deliberate and intentional. My mental health has skyrocketed. I know that because one, I'm on a camera. Two, I can leave my apartment. I'm not agoraphobic anymore. I'm not having crippling panic attacks for 8 hours every day. Like literally lying in a bed, shaking, going to the emergency room, convinced this is the end. Like, that was my baseline. That was a version of me I did not recognize. But since creating and taking that time to create that self map, I will tell you what, completely different. Lights, lights and bounds, leaps and bounds different. So if we're all on this journey together, the whole point of this video is to be just a calm, casual conversation with somebody like you. No changing angles, no fancy things popping up. This is just a conversation about observing emotions and what I think about it without any production or BS, right? So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for having a chat with me. Thanks for listening. Write in the comments what it is you're observing. Actually, I got this. In the comments, I think it'd be really cool. Write the top 3 things you want to create on your self map. Mine will be peace, worthiness, and love. They're my 3. All right, we're out of here. Catch you later. Peace.